All right, welcome back to the program. It's Good Morning Nigeria this Wednesday, and it's live on the network service of the NTA. And today, we'll be looking at the GDP growth, the recent GDP growth released by the NBS. And of course, we'll be finding out from the experts how this, of course, relates or will relate of course, to everyone watching, to the ordinary Nigerians, and how realistic it is. And to begin our conversation on this topic, let's listen into the background report, and it's put together by our correspondent, Uyemi Ajayi.
The National Bureau of Statistics has disclosed that Nigeria's gross domestic product, GDP, grew by 3.19% year-on-year. In real terms, in the second quarter of the year 2024, compared to 2.51% in the same period of 2023. It was revealed that the performance was also higher than the 2.98% recorded in the first quarter of the year 2024. According to the Gross Domestic Product 2024 reports released by the Statistical Agency, the growth was driven mainly by the services sector, which grew by 3.79% and contributed 58.76% to the aggregate GDP. In the quarter under review, aggregate GDP at basic price increased by 16.94% to 60.93 trillion naira in nominal terms, compared to 52.10 trillion in the same quarter of 2023. The real GDP was 18.29 trillion naira. It was also said to have come as the Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edu, unveiled the Implementation Committee of the Accelerated Stabilization and Advancement Plan, ASAP, which is aimed at revitalizing key sectors of the economy. The ASAP, which seeks to drive sustainable development across 8 priority sectors of the economy, include agriculture, energy and health, is aimed to addressing key challenges affecting the federal government's reform initiatives and stimulating development in various sectors of the economy. Agricultural sector grew by 1.41% from the growth of 1.50% recorded in the same second quarter of 2023. Also in 3.53%, an improvement from 1.94% in second quarter of 2023. In terms of the share of the GDP, the industry of services sector contributed more to the aggregate GDP in the review period. Now, how can the country consolidate on this to free itself from the grip of inflation? Also, what more can be done to boost the growth of the country? Our guests already in the studio will be responding shortly.
Thanks, Oyemi, for the background report. Let's introduce our guest already seated in the studio for today's conversation. And joining us here is our guest, our usual, Professor Uche Waleke, Professor of Capital Market at the Nasarawa State University, KEFI, and President Capital Market Economics in Nigeria. Prof, you are welcome once again to
Thank you so much, Ademola. Thank you, Claire. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good morning to you too. Good to have you. And we are launching...
Relaunching, I like that.
We want to launch Dr. Abdullahi Jibril, is a Statistical Intelligence Unit, National Bureau of Statistics, NBS. You are welcome for the first time to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Ademola. Thank you, Madam Claire. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll also have a guest from Kaduna, Professor Ishao Ango. Also a familiar face in Good Morning Nigeria, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, and also Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics, Kaduna State University. Professor Ango, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, you are welcome. I don't know whether to say you are welcome. Good morning, Nigerians. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move away from Kaduna to Lagos. And our guest is joining us via Zoom, another household name on Good Morning Nigeria, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Chief Executive Officer, Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise, and also former Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you again, and it's good to see you.
Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Demola, and good morning, Nigeria. And good morning to my colleagues in the studio and outside. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Now let's kickstart our conversation this morning, Prof.
Okay.
Just throw the first question at you. Is that Nigeria's GDP grew by 3.19% in quarter two of this 2004, higher than the 2.51% that we recorded last year in the same quarter. What are the key factors for driving this growth, and how sustainable is it?
Thank you, Demola. The first is to say that it's cheering news that we are recording an improvement over the previous quarter and over the performance in the corresponding year. 3.19%, inching up from 2.98% in quarter one of 2024. We often say that before you can have economic development, before you can talk about improving the welfare of people, theoretically we say that the first thing is that you must first grow, have positive and strong GDP growth. So we say that yes, even though GDP growth is not a sufficient condition, but it's a necessary condition for economic growth. So when you find GDP growing, okay, it gives comfort. The IMF has projected that the Nigerian economy will grow by, I think, 3.1% for 2024. The government is projecting 3.76%. That's the federal government. Central Bank is projecting 3.36% or thereabouts for 2024. So, except we continue on this positive trajectory, okay, those targets, may not be met. So what I'm saying is that it's important that we at least recognize that GDP has to grow, especially above population. If you look at our growth in the last 5 years, they have been below 2.5. If you factor in the fact that we had a recession in 2020, okay, we also had in 2016. So if you take from 2015, the GDP growth rate actually has been less than 2%. And that kind of GDP growth rate cannot, make any significant impact, because people often say we can't feel, the GDP. First, GDP has to translate to revenues before people can begin to feel it. Okay, so if it's low, below population growth rate, okay, you can't have a growth rate that is inclusive, a growth rate that's impactful. Now, coming to the numbers just released by the MBS, you asked what are the factors, what were the factors that drove the numbers. When I looked at those numbers, I could see that the oil sector actually powered, because the oil sector in quarter one of 2024 grew by 5.77%. But if you check the oil sector in this second quarter, it was 10.15%. You can see the leap from 5.7 to 10.15. Okay, but again, what one can also see is that is largely attributable to the fact that oil price, improved. Now, the oil price in January this year, was around $82 per barrel. By April, that's the beginning of the second quarter, it had gone as high as $93 per barrel. So if you take the average, oil spot price for the second quarter and the first quarter, the one of second quarter performed better. That's why you saw that improvement in oil sector, because as a matter of fact, production fell. Crude oil production fell from 1.57 million in quarter one to 1.41% in quarter two. So despite the fall in crude oil production, we still had that performance in the oil sector. So that tells you that it must have come more from, the price. Okay. So another thing I also see that helped it, factor is agri sector. agri-sector actually increased. If you notice, agri-sector in quarter one was just 0.18%, but in the quarter two, it had gone up to 1.41%. So agri-sector actually gave a boost, okay? And of course, this is a sector that contributed 22%, to GDP. So agri-sector, played a critical role. The oil sector also played a critical role. But we also saw some tech sectors that dragged, the GDP performance. Sectors like manufacturing actually declined. It was 1.49% in quarter one, but fell to 8%. No, manufacturing.
Okay.
Manufacturing fell. Trade also declined. We saw declines in transport, particularly transport. And that of transport, one can easily attribute it to the high cost of energy, fuel issues in quarter two. That was why transport dropped from a positive territory, 3.3% in quarter one, to minus 13.5% in quarter two. So transport actually fell. So when you look at all this in aggregate, you now see that the agri sector, which is what, in my view, drove the, you had industry grew by 3%, all right? The services sector, generally, because the finance and insurance sector, grew by as much as 28%, even though it was also lower than what we saw in the first quarter. Okay, how sustainable? Maybe the next.
Just hold your breath, Professor Waleke.
Yeah, thank you.
This is the it's really an area that I fancy talking about because each time you tell us all these figures, economies, it still becomes hazy. It's still hazy.
Actually, the man out there on the street does not even understand all these figures.
While
so he just wants something translated into what they can physically.
Yes. So Demola has started with you.
Program,
Demola has started with you, the professor. Let me bring Dr. Jibril into our conversation because you are from the NBS. You people make all these calculations for us. So just help us understand how these calculations are made. Because if the layman's understanding of what GDP is, total value of all the goods and services that are produced either within a year or within a month and all that, and the spendings and all that, it would then mean that when you say a country's GDP has grown, it means that our productions have also increased. Therefore, it should reflect, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, let me start. That's in terms of the production of the GDP. When we have about 46 economic activities, that's ranging from agriculture to other services. So if you break it into three, we say we have agriculture, industry, and services. That's a broad classification of this. The sources of this information varies. Each and every sector has a source of information. So let me start with, for instance, if we talk of finance, the major sources of data for finance is coming from Central Bank of Nigeria. So basically the activities of, that is the loans, deposit, giving, then they have other source of income, ATM machine and other things like that. So these are their output now. Then we have the insurance. These are the policies that people purchase, that is with the insurance company, that determine whenever it increases. So we say that GDP has increased. If it falls low, then we now say that the insurance output has decreases. So that's about the financing. Then when it comes to crop production, that's when it comes to agriculture. Now. So in agriculture, we have about 4 economic activities there. Crop production, we have fishery, we have livestock, then we now have forestry. For instance, the crop production now, for instance, which is part of the drivers of the current, that is GDP, growth, So the crop production, actually, we go into the field, that one. If we go into the field, it's a sample, actually, we can cover the whole country. So we take part of the sample, which is a normal thing we do like every quarter, then we calculate whatever their output is. So on the basis of that, we now realize that whether the crop production is going up, decreasing.
How do you get the samples? Yes. How do you go to the samples, and the figures?
The figures. This more like a survey. We run a survey on those samples. We run a survey because it's so huge that we cannot cover it. But in terms of manufacturing, that's in terms of that is financial institutions, rather those ones we can cover all of them because we just we have a point of
let's
point
stay
of
with the
collection.
agric.
Okay.
Yes, at least the viewer can relate.
Okay. So we go to the field, we lodge our questionnaires to those people that are into agriculture, then we collect information from there, then we now come and process the information. So on the basis of that, we now understand whether there is increase in terms of crop production or maybe there's a decrease in terms of crop production. So that's the way we do. Each and every sector has a mode of, that is a nature of questions we ask. Okay. It's not just one simple question. What I ask the man in livestock is not the same thing as what I ask from the man in refining industry or the man in food, beverages, and so we have different questionnaires that fit in, that is to this different, that
is it closed-ended or open-ended questions?
When you say closed-ended, please can you elaborate on that?
Is it questions that you give the respondent an opportunity to also, make other inputs apart from the yes or no things?
No. Mostly it's not yes and no. That's in national accounting. You ask them about the amount produced. So it's about the amount produced. Then you may not ask further question on why does it maybe go, that is the production goes higher, or why do we have a low production, so as to guide you in that is in your writings and other things like that. But really we go in monetary terms. That's what we ask them basically. Then whenever you have something like the real GDP now, so the real GDP is we are taking the effect of inflation out of it. Then we now compare the current situation and maybe our base year with our base year. So when you put them side by side, then you now see, is there any increase? So that's what we call the real, by taking away the effect of inflation. But when you say that is in current terms, meaning it just gives you the price of the economy, whether it's real or not. So the real time is the real, that is a measure of what the GDP is all about. So it gives you, that is minus the inflation, what exactly? Is there any improvement compared to the last similar quarter, or is there a decrease? So it gives you the real picture of where you are.
So based on all of this, the NBS came up with a report that this quarter two, there's been an increase, in economic activities. There's been an improvement in economic activities. Okay.
From your statistics, right?
Yeah.
All right. But do you actually go to the people on the street as well to get their feedback?
I said we have different the economy. Some are more of an administrative questionnaire that we give to them, like the central bank, the NNPC, that's crude petroleum. This one is something you can verify. So it's we call it a system of administrative statistics. So we lodge questionnaire with them quarter in, quarter out. They send that is their output to us. Then in terms of manufacturing, the manufacturing are not organized to that level. So we have to pick, we have about 13 sectors of the economy, that is manufacturing sectors. So we have to handpick, that is for each and every sector, we pick related activities. That's people that are into related activity. Then we now lodge questionnaire on them, more like a survey. You understand what I mean? Then the other side of it again, where we have the individuals now coming in, and that's a household now. That's other services. That's where those ones are now coming in. So people that have salon, barbing salon, just mention artisans and all that. So those are the kind of people that we now lodge questionnaires on. That's at household level now. So it's not just a straitjacket whereby everybody just give him the same thing. Everybody has a kind of a nature of question being asked. Then he now provide. Even the estimation is different totally.
Just before Demola goes to the either respondents, Professor Waleke said something about the drivers, for the growth. He mentioned the oil sector, and of course the fact that our production, capacity did not, improve as such, but the market prices. Yes, but the market prices. Now, do you take note of that, and what is also driving the growth? The improvement in those other sectors.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, you see, definitely the production drop 1.44. That's at 1.44. That is million barrel per day. That's compared to 1.5 million barrel. That's in the last quarter. But remember that if we're making a comparison, we don't put the effect of seasonality into consideration. So if we're comparing quarter two this year we compare it with quarter 2 of last year. So the production as at last year, 2023, second quarter is not up to what we have currently now, which is about 1.22%. So you see there's a kind of a gap. But if you're comparing quarter, that is quarter on quarter, and that's this quarter against first quarter, there definitely there's a drop. But in reality, that's whenever that's in real terms, is this quarter 2024 against last year quarter 2023. 2023. That's going to give you the real picture of what you need to see, whether there is improvement or there is no improvement because of what the seasonality effect there. When I say seasonality effect, meaning that you compare the quarters because they are alike. That the same form, wind, temperature, marketing system, everything are very similar. So that's when you understand whether there is improvement or there is otherwise affected.
Okay, all right. Dr. Abdullahi, okay, thank you for your contribution there. We'll come back to you, but let's get to our Kaduna studio where we have Professor Ushua Ango to also explain to us what this GDP is all about, the latest GDP growth figures. Some say it signals economic recovery and resilience. What's your own view on this?
I think this has been put correctly by the previous speakers. What we have seen, because unlike what we have had in 2020, following 2019, where we saw that, the economy actually had a negative growth. We have had that also in 2016. Now, unlike that, what we are seeing or we are witnessing is a growth. Now, of course, that growth means, it's a positive trajectory as we are seeing it. However, of course, I know the average man on the street, what concerns them is how does that affect their own well-being and, general how they go along with their lives. Now, those have been also put correctly by the earlier speakers. So for us, this is a positive trajectory. The fact that quarter on quarter we have improved to 3.19, and then compared to last year, even a higher, second quarter of last year is even higher. Now, this is positive. But however, we need to also put this side by side with our expectations, and especially the vision of this current administration, which is trying to say that we want to grow the GDP of Nigeria to a 1 trillion economy. In fact, we should have been much more than 1 trillion as an economy in Nigeria. But where are we today? Now, given the various initiatives and policies that have been put in place, Nigeria is no longer number 1, it's no longer number 2, not even number 3 in Africa in terms of GDP as it is because of the devaluation of our currency. Now, what we need basically, if we are going to engineer this economy and we are going to make this economy to be felt actually by the average Nigerian, is that the growth has to be, in much more, greater proportion. We should be talking of double-digit growth. Then that way, perhaps, we should have an economy that is responding. Then people will even feel it, much more. And so if we grow, we saw the relative contribution of the various sectors in the economy. The service sector doing very well, relatively, compared to other sectors. We need to grow the economy much more, and for us to achieve those aspirations, we need to do a lot more, especially, in ensuring that there is energy, to power the economy, in ensuring that the logistics, the transportation sector works, ensuring that, the manufacturing sector works very well, That way there will be more employment, there will be more capacity of Nigerians to survive. We have just come over, we're almost going over the very hard times because the inflationary rate is coming down slightly from what we have seen. The inflation had gone so high that the average Nigerian could not afford so many things, especially the issue of food inflation, which had been a matter of discussion in this program earlier. So Those things are there, and I believe what we need to do, especially if we look inward, if we look and develop the economy, don't grow the economy in sectors or in areas where the money is actually going to power some other economies abroad. Let's develop our economy as much as possible in the sense that we use our own resources to develop our people, to create more employment. That way, I believe the growth will be much more than the 3.19 we have seen. But it's a positive trajectory. It's good that it's not negative. But I believe we can do a lot more if we put ourselves, if everybody puts his or her hand in it, especially the government.
Mr. Ango, let's go to Lagos. Dr. Muda, we're told that this is probably the second highest performance of the economy in the last five quarters, which means if we take it on the surface, it will mean that the economy is making a kind of rebounds, but not with the manufacturing sector. As Professor Waleke earlier indicated, the manufacturing sector seems to be pulling us back. What's your response?
Yes, thank you very much. I agree with Professor Waleke and the previous speakers. In terms of the direction of economic performance, I think generally this is positive because we are not talking about aggregate contraction of the economy. We are talking about growth. And just as you said in your background report, we compare this to the previous level of growth from 2.98 to 3.19. That is an improvement, even though it is marginal. But the performance generally has not been even, and I mean, that is not unusual. We have some key sectors that actually powered this growth. And when we talk about economy and we talk about growth, it is important to emphasize how inclusive the growth is. Earlier, you are talking about what the perception of the citizens, the perception of investors about the economy. Sometimes these perceptions are at variance with some of this data. And from what we have seen in this GDP data, the key sectors that actually drove this growth, first was crude oil and gas, which grew by 10.15%. Metal ores, which grew by 58%, which is quite big. We have rail transport, which grew by 57.14%. That is quite significant. We have water transport, which grew by 33%. We have the financial institutions, which grew by 30%. You can see that these are big numbers. But the challenge is, how impactful are these sectors that have grown so phenomenally? You know, they are not the key sectors that has so many people on board. And of course, we have some marginal growth in some other sectors. For instance, agriculture grew by 1.41%, which is less than 2%. Manufacturing also grew by less than 2%. Trade grew by 0.7%. When you look at agriculture, you look at trade, you look at construction, you look at manufacturing, these are sectors that had a lot of people, that has what we call high job elasticity. So that when they grow, they create a lot of jobs. So we are still grappling with this very, very critical sector that can really promote inclusive growth in the economy. But the good thing is that they are still, in the positive territory. So to that extent, given the context in which they are all operating, I think we can still say that, well, we are on the path to recovery. But we also need to recognize the fact that some sectors are still in recession. The aviation sector, for instance, is still in recession. The livestock sector, the aviation, of course, you can recognize the challenges they are facing, cost of aviation fuel, all manner of charges and all of that. You can see, the fact that all of these things have been affecting the air traffic, especially domestically. Then the livestock sector is also still in recession. You know, when you look at what is happening to the herders, farmer clashes, and particularly to our poultry sector, they have been in recession for quite a number of quarters now. You know, often when we talk of livestock, a lot of people focus more on this on these herders, cattle, and all of that. But we are not paying enough attention to poultry because it's a very critical sector and it has been grappling with a lot of challenges. You know, and many poultry investors have gone under. Some of them have packed up, especially because of the high cost of feed. Then the oil refining has also been in recession for a number of years, which is also very, very unfortunate because this is an oil-producing country, and we have the oil refining sector being in recession up until now. Hopefully, by the time the Dangote refinery begins full production and the Port Harcourt refinery comes, maybe we're out of that. But one of the biggest things that have been dragging us down as an economy is the amount we spend on importation of petroleum products. It's one of the biggest problems that this economy is facing. It's creating a lot of macroeconomic challenges. It's affecting our exchange rate. It's affecting reserves. And it's creating a lot of challenges. I mean, you can see the challenges of fuel queues and all of that. All of those things are affecting productivity. Then the textile sector is also still in recession. We have been battling with this, but this is an extension of the general problems that we have in manufacturing. There are some initiatives by government trying to revive the textile industry. That is fine. But it is difficult to any sector in manufacturing if you don't fix the energy issue. If you don't fix the issue of logistics, it will be extremely difficult. Then, of course, we have quarry and some minerals. They are also still in recession. Then the road transport sector contracted. The motor vehicle assembly also contracted. The publishing and motion picture music industry also contracted. So we have sectors that have contracted. We have sectors that are still in recession. We have sectors that are growing. We have sectors that decline. So what all this point to is the fact this is to guide us in terms of policy, because the essence of this data is not just for data in themselves. It's for us to look at which sectors are still in recession, which sectors are slowing down, and we come up with policies to address them. In your background report, you already identify some of the policies that the government is putting in place, especially under the accelerated stabilization program. But the challenge with some of those policies is this.
Okay, I just wanted to add that, you know, in terms of the poultry that Dr. Yusuf mentioned, you know, the Presidential Livestock Implementation Committee, I mean, you know, the secretary was here, Professor Yaya was here on Good Morning Nigeria some time ago, and of course they spoke on plans, you know, to revitalize that aspect of, you know, of livestock. Yes, so efforts are on really, you know, to reform the poultry sector.
Okay, well,
just to add.
Okay, Professor Walike. Now let's come back to you. I mean, from all that have been said, you know, some sectors that have recorded a lot, I mean, growth. For instance, the agricultural sector, slight growth actually, and like Dr. Muda was saying, that many of the sectors are still very contracted. They are still under recession. So what can be done actually to bring back to life all these sectors that are still facing a lot of challenges?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, the first thing to say is that
especially the agricultural sector, actually.
Yes. For all of them, it's important to recognize that we are talking about an economy. And for me, an economy is like a car. I often use this analogy. It's like a car that needs to be designed. Okay? In a car, the engine is very critical. And what is the engine in an economy? Power. Power is very critical. Whether it is agriculture, whether it is education, whether today Vice complaining, I'm sure you have read about electricity, bills.
The bill.
Yes. So power is very critical. That is the engine of an economy. Then, of course, a car needs tires to move. And that's where you also have the place of transport. Transport is very important, to accelerate, economic growth. Then you can also talk about, even the fuel you put in the car. In this instance, the fuel, okay, petroleum products, very critical as well. And then the type of car you want to drive. Okay, if you want to drive a big car, in the case of an economy, you need the steel industry. So steel is also important, and that's why I was happy when I read about people say they also want to go into steel production. So the I also read recently about some investors coming to visit Ajokuta. Government wants to revitalize Ajokuta steel. So that's critical if we must industrialize. So the point I'm making is that these are, for me, the enablers. The enablers must be in place. And that is why anytime I pick up a development plan, I see a national development plan, even the one we have now, okay, the initial chapters I expect to see in a development plan are these enablers. So you don't start a development plan by talking about GDP or talking about agriculture, no, and then at the end you start talking about the enablers. The enablers are the things you must, in terms of sequencing, address, because they are the ones that will power the other sectors of the economy. So energy is very critical, as I said earlier on. Transport, steel, fuel, these things are critical. Okay. Now, if you also look at the data, meanwhile, let me even commend the MBS. They have been regular in publishing this data, whether in terms of CPI or even GDP. I also think, as has been rightly mentioned, government should use this data, in formulating policies. If you look at the CPI, the data they publish, and the GDP, you can see a correlation.
Okay. Yes.
Look at the CPI, the inflation data. The pressure point, okay, there is food. If you look at they have 12 divisions, 12 classifications. The major one is food and non-alcoholic beverages. In the last one they published, inflation rates, headline inflation, okay, went up by 33.4%. Okay. And out of that 33.4%, food accounted for over 17%, over 50%, followed by fuel and electricity, followed by clothing, followed by transport. Now, if you take the first four in those classifications, you get as much as 25-26% of the inflation drivers. So you can now relate that to GDP figure. You can see that because we are having weak growth in agri GDP, you can see the impact it's having on inflation. So for me, addressing the agri issue is like using a silver bullet. Use a silver bullet to tackle not only GDP, because if you grow agri GDP by 5-6% today, you can see the impact it will have on the entire GDP figure, because agri contributes over 20% to GDP. It's a very heavy area. Mm-hmm. So if you are tackling food, you are also indirectly tackling inflation, because food inflation, once food inflation comes down, inflation rates will come down. We saw that last month. Part of why inflation rate came down last month was because food inflation fell. So we need to recognize that, and that's why I also think that dealing with all this will require both the monetary and fiscal policies, collaborating. So it's not about the central bank saying my beat is inflation. Okay, the monetary side should handle the growth issues. The two must come together to handle it, because they are linked. I've just told you how they are linked now. Because as you're tackling food, you're also dropping inflation, which is why I also, I've always argued that the central bank should not wash its hands completely from interventions in the agri sector. Oh. Okay, the central bank, recognize that yes, their primary function is monetary policy, price stability, but there should also be a development function, which, because some argue that is not their turf, they can do through the development banks, they can do through some other special post vehicles. But the important thing is that they're intervening. because our development finance institutions today are weak. In the US, for example, the US Federal Reserve also bothers about growth, also bothers about unemployment. That is why you find the US Federal Reserve objective, okay, is dual. They have the objective of price stability, and they also have the objective of promoting, maximum employment. That is the US, okay, and that's why Jerome Powell is the chair of the Federal Reserve, or equivalent of central bank. Recently, what did he say? He said that they were considering reducing the Fed fund rate, okay, or the equivalent of monetary policy rate in the US, okay, because according to him, the economy has started, the job market or labor market has started cooling. So when you say the labor market is cooling, it means unemployment has started rising. So when unemployment rate starts rising, the central bank should be concerned. That's my point. But
the central bank has consistently said, I remember the day you said it here,
yes,
and the lady from the central bank was also here,
yes,
and she said that, look, that intervention that you talk about, that it's really outside the jurisdiction of the CBN.
Yes, that's the point I'm
making.
making.
Amount to distraction.
Yeah, but can you see the point? I'm saying they're linked. That the day food comes down, the day food prices come down significantly,
it will affect
it will also
inflation,
help them. Yes, inflation rate will come down. That's the point I'm making. So the two must work, the fiscal and monetary must work hand in hand to bring down
must the CBN be the one to do the intervention?
Which means that the CBN cannot totally remove itself from...
That's the point.
Okay.
No,
yes,
but must
in
it
the
be
past,
the CBN?
Remember, central bank was involved in anchor borrower and the rest of them.
Precisely.
Yes, we agree. There were abuses and so on. The point I'm making now is this: that what those interventions require, okay, are reforms. You reform them, you take out the corruption element in them, and ensure that they work. The moment you have targeted interventions, because right now the Bank of Industry is weak, we all know, and it will take time to revive. Okay, I am saying the effort, the fiscal side,
implementation of this intervention, the effort they must work on.
Yes, the effort the fiscal side is making now in the agri space. Okay, I am saying the central bank can complement. We have seen the government. Part of why food inflation fell, I'm sure MBS will say that.
Okay.
The federal government, distributed fertilizers. The federal government has been distributing. We understand, farm, implements and so on. So, and the federal government is also targeting. Check their plan. The 10 million, hectares of land. So there are efforts in the area of growing food, and I'm saying those efforts can also be accelerated. They can help to accelerate that. Central bank can help to accelerate that. Okay. So that's one. Let me learn.
Yes.
That's for agri. Dr. Muda Yusuf also talked about textile, and that's also critical. You can see the inflation figure too. You can see clothing. Clothing number 3. You have also transport. So I am saying by the time you work on these levers, inflation rates will come down, because between the 4 or 5 of them, you have as much as 28%. That is, so if we are talking about what we need to do, is for us to look at these numbers and try to work on them. If you look at the GDP, for example, I just told you the place agri can play. Look at the oil sector. Oil production fell to 1.4, as I said, from 1.57 in quarter 1. What does that tell you? It tells you that if you can ramp up oil production, GDP will grow. Oil production dropped, and yet we had this. So if we can ramp up oil production, GDP will grow. That's the more reason. Okay, whatever is being done now to incentivize investments in the oil and gas sector, should be
encouraged.
Yeah, should be encouraged. And the issue of oil theft, okay, pipeline vandalism, okay, government has been on it, and that's why if you compare what happened in 2023 to 2024 in terms of oil production, there was an improvement. So that tells us that government is winning to a large extent, winning the battle in that area. But that should be sustained. We need to ramp up oil production if we must grow GDP. And I also want to agree with Dr. Muda Yusuf. The focus should also be on employment elastic, sectors, such as agri is one of them. manufacturing is another, and so on. Because that is why people on the street will tell you they're not feeling it. They're not feeling it because the sectors that are powering are sectors that have limited capacity to even employ. Remember, growth has a direct relationship with employment. Okay? So if you grow agriculture, all right, agriculture employs so many people in this country. Okay? So you reduce unemployment, you bring down inflation. That's why I keep saying, for me, that sector is like a silver bullet.
Professor Waleke, thank you. I was going to stop you, but thank you for thank you for stopping. Dr. Jubrin, I want you again, so that we'll understand how these things are calculated, whether it, factors in, relatable elements in all of this. If you go from, north to, south, east to west, there are, disparities across board. So do you also factor this disparity when you're making your calculations?
Yeah, when you say disparity, yes.
There are changes. For instance, if the crops you buy in the north, it's not the same thing. The quantity grown in the north is not also the same thing in the south, and vice versa, east and west. So all of these disparities across the elements and factors that you take into consideration, do you factor it in the calculation?
Yeah, let me just make a little correction with in terms of the crop production. Yeah, we liaise with the Ministry of Agriculture. That's in terms of the data from the crop. That's we run surveys together with them. You understand? So that's what I forget to mention here. So in terms of the GDP, virtually we have, it can tentatively give you exactly the number of crops we have. It cut across almost everything that we produce within the economy. So you realize that even the development we have now, it's not everything that has been produced within the north. You understand, maybe the southern factor is there already because we have some items that are coming from the southern in terms of yams and other things like that. You understand what I mean? So these are what gives it a little boost. Then, plus the little that is we're getting from the north now, because some people have started, consuming fresh maize, even the dried one. That's the new one.
The dried season.
Yeah, exactly.
Maize.
So you realize that it's a kind of it's a kind of a total overhauling of the economy in terms of data collection. When it comes to data collection, we don't segregate that this section should be part of it. So it is a kind of a basket. So actually, not everything comes from the north, not everything comes from the south. So it's a mix of a basket.
Do you select particular? Let's with agriculture now. Do you select select particular crops? Are there particular crops, or you just random selection?
No. It's a basket actually. It's a basket. Start maize, rice. Just mention a whole lot of them. But remember that some of them are seasonal.
Seasonal.
Yeah, there are some like rice now. I doubt if rice is out now. So meaning that you may not see much about rice. Yeah. But one thing in agriculture, again, they have to account for it. The reason why is that it takes a year. And all through that year, you are preparing the ground, planting, gestation period, harvesting. So all those things have cost attached to those things. So even if rice is not doing very well, maybe probably because it's not the harvesting period, but you still find something there. Because they have to account for what they expend in terms of the production of that aspect.
But do you also have an idea why certain sectors are not,
actually
doing well?
performing?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I would say that there is no total stability in any of the economy in the world. We still have some problems coming here and there. So the essence of producing the GDP is to give a kind of a clear picture, an outlook of what the economy is like. So the government now can act upon those sectors that are weak there. And for those ones who are doing very well, okay, how do we maintain them? You understand that? So when you talk of maybe those ones that are weak, I would say that most likely, let me just
manufacturing.
Like manufacturing now, for instance. You realize that manufacturing has not been doing very well, really. And it's not peculiar to Nigeria alone. All countries that have oil used to seem to have that peculiar problem of manufacturing not doing very, very well because they can't compete with other counterparts in the other part of the world. Because that is, we have excess dollars that comes outside, that's from outside. So by the time they are producing, rather, they can produce at a significant level that they can export, compete with their counterpart outside the economy. Which is, I think, for those people that read petroleum economy, we always tell you that we normally have that kind of problem, except if there is going to be a deliberate act that if a company can break even, then it must continue producing, which is very, very good for us. There will be a kind of lesser pressure on the dollar itself.
To produce, to break even, would require addressing some of the issues, Professor Walike and Dr. Moda. And one critical one will be energy.
Energy, sure. If energy is doing very, very well, hopefully that the manufacturing industry will do very well. And there will be lesser pressure on the dollars we have been clamoring on, because the excess, why we're even having the inflation is because of the excess demand of the dollar. Dollar cannot meet that demand of people. Okay. So then definitely the price would definitely go very high. So if we maintain that, if we are able to tackle that issue, then definitely the pressure will be less on the dollar and the economy will flow very, very well.
All right.
That's the way I'm looking at it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Let's bring in Professor Ango into the discussion now before we go on break. We've talked about the issue of agriculture, because right now the most challenged issues in front of Nigerians now is food. And that is one of the things that fueled the last protest that we had across the country. And we observed that agriculture did not really perform as expected. So what do you make of this? How can we improve on that sector?
In fact, this is a very good question, actually. The performance of agric, especially the crop sector, was good, in the last quarter, based on the figures presented. However, the sector, as we have said in this and in several other fora of this nature, is perhaps the most important sector of the economy because of the number of people that are employed in agric and the value chain, if you look at everything related to agriculture. Now, so much has happened and so much has been achieved in the last 8 years, or 9 years then, we can say, of the previous administration. Because if you remember very well, what we used to have is an economy that perhaps the most stable food here in Nigeria is rice. Every household consumes rice, and we were importing 90% perhaps, or 80% of whatever rice we were consuming. And for what has happened, and whatever wrongs were made in terms of the ANCO borrowers and other schemes that were developed in the previous administration, at least we have been able to reverse that aspect of rice, depending on rice imports. People have changed, even everybody more or less has changed their taste, and we have now accepted our local rice as an alternative to the imported rice. Now, some of those policies, rather than jettisoning them completely, and saying that, for example, we should discard ANCO borrower scheme because there were so many things wrong. Certainly, there were many things wrong with it. But jettisoning it, when you have gotten something right, I think the best thing will have been to now fine-tune and correct the process and ensure that instead of just rice, we have now brought it into other commodities. And we have now gone further on the, if you look at the value chain, and see what can we do now to process? What can we do to ensure that for what we can export, we are exporting? That is the kind of thing that we need to do. So I also agree with Professor Walike that the issue of saying that central bank should not intervene is wrong, because central bank intervened, but perhaps many things were done wrong. That doesn't mean that we should not do it at all. I believe if we put money where it matters, and we use money or we apply money where it matters, it will help a lot. The decisions we have made, government made recently, for example, to say because of the pressure, because of the inflation, because people are aware, and I believe to a large extent quite a number of people are still hungry, then because of that, we rashly said, for example, we are removing duty on 5 items for 5 months. 4 items for 5 months. Of course, that is good. It will give the public and that chance to be happy. But in the long run, it will harm the economy more, because those people who have gone into agriculture, because of what has happened in the previous years, will not do that if they realize they are investing their money and they're not making money. So many industries have been established to process rice locally. Now, those investments will not be, will have problems, because, those investors will have problems. So a lot of what we need to do a lot to encourage that sector of agriculture. What we have done, what government has done of recent, which is to distribute, which is still ongoing, distributing of fertilizer that was purchased by the central bank, over, I believe, 4 million bags of fertilizer, is ongoing. It's good, because that means we are saying, if you subsidize if the subsidy actually goes to the farmer, and the farmer now can produce at a lower price, and then the farmer can now sell at a price that the average Nigerian can afford. But to expect the farmer or whoever it is in the chain to now sell their products cheaper than perhaps, for example, what they sell toiletries, or how they sell other products, because the same farmer will go to the market and buy some of these products, and you're expecting food prices to come down, whereas every other price has gone up. We will be deceiving ourselves. Given the insecurity we have in the country, which is affecting agriculture more than other sectors, I believe we need to put our policies in place to ensure we encourage food security more than anything. So I believe, for policy, for those engaged in policy, we need to come up with policies that are all-inclusive, that have long-term plan, but certainly, among most things, we must ensure energy sufficiency. We must ensure food security. And one of the things we can do to ensure food security is, we have quite a number of unemployed people, and we can now say, for example, go to each local government, get like 1,000 hectares or so, distribute it to 1,000 of these graduates, provide services to them in terms of extension, guide them, put them through, train them. For each local government, there are some products that are there. Then establish and encourage establishment of industry that will process the output of those things. That will ensure in the long term we do that. Another thing we can do, of course, will be in other sectors, for example, in construction, in other things. We must ensure that we engage our own. We must use local talents. We must use local resources. We should not use the economy to power other economies abroad. In the process of, in doing that, we are doing a disservice to this economy. And for
I think we seem to have lost Prof. there. We'll take a break now. When we come back, the conversation continues. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're still on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Our discussion is still on the latest GDP growth figures. And before we went on break, Professor Ango was giving us tips on how to close the gap in agriculture in order to aid the growth in that sector. So we'll go back to Professor Ango so that he can conclude his thought on this. Prof.
I'm suggesting that, we need to sustain whatever initiatives are there. We need to introduce new initiatives. The most important thing is to ensure that there is transparency in whatever has been done. The government has now released fertilizer, which is being distributed as we speak, as a palliative, to farmers. They said it was the stock of central bank, over 4 million bags. Those kind of initiatives are required. So long as we ensure that the help goes to the farmer, that should be sustained. And I'm encouraging that, we should employ our youths, by giving them half a hectare, because with the value now of agri, a hectare is enough to actually sustain an average youth who has just come out of school. So that way we'll grow food, we'll have sufficient food in Nigeria, we'll be able to feed ourselves first and foremost, and that is important. As long as we allow ourselves to go for import, when we're importing is much more than what we are producing locally, then we are in danger. And that danger will lead to so many other things. We will receive so many conditions, and we have no alternative than to comply with whatever conditions we are given. So I believe the most important thing, sectors that can engineer growth in GDP, will be agriculture, energy, and energy. If we do that, the other sectors will fall in line. The service sector is already doing very well. They will be there to provide. Of course, transportation will be critical, and especially if we make or develop our rail transport so that it now start to carry goods rather than just passengers. The little we are doing in terms of the new modern gauge railway system so far is not targeting haulage of goods. I believe with the extension of the corridor from Kano to Jibia to Maradi, if you link that Kano to the Kaduna, and then you link Abuja, say, to Wari, and then you link Abuja to Ibadan, and then you now start using that, to convey goods and services, that will clearly open the economy and ease the way goods are transported, and then perhaps the price differential you see in goods, especially agricultural products between, say, the north and the south, you will not see much of it if the cost of transportation is lower. What is driving the cost now largely is the issue of transportation. Thank you.
Mr. Ango, thank you. If Dr. Moda Yusuf is still with us, Dr. Yusuf, I'm just wondering, in terms of solutions, in terms of reforms, and addressing some of the challenges that have been mentioned. I know that some of the accelerated stabilization advancement economic plan, was launched, and that was, supposed to tackle some of these challenges, especially in the area of high cost of production and cost of raw materials and all that. What would be your recommendations in terms of short-term measures now to address the issues that are afflicting the very high job elastic regions that are not doing well at the moment for our GDP?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very, very good question. First, let me say that the economic stabilization plan that has been rolled out by government is a very, very good plan. The importation component of that plan is not so much to hurt those who are in production. Because if you look at the guidelines that was released, the guidelines states that it's not as if government is importing finished parboiled rice. What the government is encouraging people to import is what the husk brown rice, or paddy rice. So those who are eligible to import these things are those who have invested in rice mills, those who have already invested in rice plantation. So it's importer. Government is saying that for you this paddy rice, you must have invested even to a particular level in rice milling facilities, in rice plantation. So just to allay that fear of prof that this is going to hurt those who are already in the base. Those people are actually the people that have been incorporated. And it's something that is time bound. It's 150 days. I just think I should make that clarification. Secondly, is to say that these plans needs to be expeditiously implemented. And here is another, because the Nigerian bureaucracy are the ones in charge of implementation of policies. The political class position can put down the policy. The lag between policy pronouncement and policy implementation is getting too long. And it's getting worrisome. So we need to see how the bureaucracy can respond and also reflect the urgency of the moment in the implementation of this plan. I mean, this whole idea of the stabilization plan, there's a huge fiscal policy component in it. And the whole essence of this fiscal component is to bring down costs. Government is talking largely about a concession in import duty. Because for us to achieve this issue of cost of living, because that is primary at this time, cost of living, cost of production, cost of operation, we need to bring down those costs. And even cost of finance. So the CBN needs to slow down on this monetary policy tightening so that interest rate can come down. The proposal contained in the stabilization plan has a big component of reduction in import duty. And government must be ready to trade off some revenue at this time. Because if you are chasing too much of revenue, you'll be putting too much pressure on those who are in production, those who are businesses. So that's extremely very important. So we are talking about manufacturing. If you are talking about agriculture, for instance, it's not only about the crops. It's also about those who are in the value chain, those who are in the processing, those who are in packaging, those who are in storage. How do we bring down their costs? We need to reduce costs. And that will mean that the government must be ready to trade off some revenue. I highlighted some sectors that are recession. Aviation is one of them. Part of the problem they are having is too much of levies, fees, taxes on them, in addition to the high energy cost. So we should bring down costs in those areas that are job elastic. We are talking about manufacturing. Yes, some concessions have been given for some things that are in the food area. We could expand it to other sectors so that their cost of their raw materials can come down. And we have been advocating that the cost of clearing cargo needs to come down. We cannot be using the exchange rate in the market rate in the forex market for the computation of import duty. It's putting a lot of pressure on businesses. We have advocated that the exchange rate for the computation of customs duty should come down to around 1,000 or even 800, as recommended by the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Reforms. These are things that you can do to bring down costs. It's putting a lot of pressure. You know, the same thing with construction. For every bungalow you build, you know how many jobs you create. How do we bring down the cost of construction? You know, so we need to look at all those things, look at how we can bring down costs, and also the government should be ready to trade off some revenue. If we need to give tax concessions to the real sector of the economy, let us give them tax concessions. Let us give them import duty waivers so that this cost can come down. If you need to scale down some of our expenditure at the level of, let us scale it down in order to create a breathing space for those who are investing. If they invest, if they grow the economy, ultimately, revenue will grow. We are talking about GDP. It is the investors that will grow the GDP. If there is no investment, the GDP cannot grow. And we need to create the environment for those who are investing at all levels. I'm not talking about just big companies. I'm talking about the SMEs.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Muda Yusuf, for your contribution there. And your major hammer is bringing down the cost of doing business, cost of production, cost of living. And if we can bring down this cost, then there will be sustainability to the growth. Professor Waleke, I know you were itching to respond to some of the issues that he raised there, especially bringing down the cost of doing business, cost of living, cost of production in this country. So what's your...
Well, it's just to say that I'm aware that there's an ongoing effort by the Taiwo Oyedele-led committee, the Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, to reform the entire tax system, you know, with a view to enabling businesses thrive. Because the ultimate is that when businesses thrive, okay, government will also earn revenue. So I think that that is still our work will soon be concluded, and once the implementation, part of it is already being implemented. So I want to believe that in the very near future, a lot of cuts that come by way of levies and taxes, will come down. The final thing I want to say on this program is this. Again, it has to do with the agri sector. I think one thing the government can also do as part of the package is to emphasize the issue of agri mechanization. Okay. Is to also recognize that subsistence farming cannot take us, too far. If you look at the average age of farmers, these days, okay, you won't find youths. Okay, that's the more reason I think that the as a study in our tertiary institutions, should be encouraged. One way we can encourage that is to give scholarships, okay, to any student, anybody who indicates interest to study agri-science, or any related, course. And on this note, I want to commend Bells University in Ota for offering scholarships to students, anywhere coming to study agriculture. So the government can take a cue.
So the mechanized farming should be encouraged.
Yes, as part of the student loan program is okay, but there should be a component of it that should be, scholarships for people going to study agriculture. That's the way you can, encourage interest in that.
We're sorry, we have to interject. Let's just take 60 seconds from Dr. Jibrin. Does this mean that cost of price, food items will come down, cost of living will come down? Is that what it means?
No, not at all, really. but what the inflation figure is telling us that the prices have come down, so we should expect that prices will come down more and more again, because you realize that agric is one of that as a crop. The agric is what we have been discussing here, is among those sectors that are pushing the economy. So we hope that prices will still come down, since already we are almost in harvesting period. So definitely things will come down. Yeah.
All right. Exactly. Thank you very much, Dr. Jibrin. A last parting word from Professor Ango. How do we sustain this growth? Just in 30 seconds, if you can.
Policy should be consistent. We should not jettison good policies. We should improve them. We should make policies. We need to jump frog, if you like, especially the energy sector. We need to do a lot in that regard. It's really, it's not good that we are having 5,000 megawatts at most. We need to be consistent on that. So long as government policy revolves around those areas that will create employment, I believe this economy will be better for it. We deserve to be number one in Africa. We should be number one. We were number one, but we have now come down to number 4 or so, but that is just because of the valuation. It doesn't matter. I think we need to grow this economy substantially so that everybody will have something to do. And as long as everybody has something to do, I believe this economy will thrive. Taking a cue from China and India, I believe we can do it.
Ango for that. Policy consistency is what we need now. And in 30 seconds, Dr. Muda.
Sorry, we don't really have enough time for Dr. Muda. Let me quickly appreciate Professor Yusau Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship and Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics, Kaduna State University. Professor Ango, thank you for joining us. And let me also appreciate Dr. Muda Yusuf, Chief Executive Officer, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, and also former Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you very much for joining us. And back here in the studio, Dr. Abdullahi Jibrin, Statistical Intelligence Unit, National Bureau of Statistics, NBS. We just launched him today. We'll be seeing more of you.
Thank you, Madam Claire.
And of course, our in-house analyst, Professor Uche Uwaleke, Professor of Capital Market at the Nasarawa State University, KEFI, President, Capital Market Academics in Nigeria. Prof, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Claire.
Well, that is Good Morning Nigeria for today. Thanks for your time. I am Ademola Adeoye.
And I'm Claire Adelabu Abdulrazak. From the GMN crew, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.